Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this week's episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, so we're gonna hop right into Some Assembly Required. This episode is written by Ty King and it's directed by Bruce Seth Green. And the blurb is, a series of grave robbings leads to a science club member who is trying to create a girlfriend for his brother, whom he has just brought back from the dead.
Pretty accurate. Yeah.
These blurbs, they really don't leave much for guessing for the audience.
No, they don't.
So I was excited for the very beginning of this episode because we have Tony Head doing the little fun Into Every Generation intro for the first time. And that was something that I remembered, but I couldn't remember if it was the second season that he started in. But I was just like, hey, it's Tony, it's Giles. Giles is giving us the lore. So this episode starts, as many episodes do, in the graveyard.
Well, before we started, I'm just going to say, I always go read through the script book before I watch the episode. The script book this time, the script for this show has absolutely nothing that's not in the show.
Huh.
It went exactly.
Well.
So that's kind of a first.
Yeah. I noticed several times, I was just like, this is actually a fairly tight episode. It's better than I remembered it being. It's still not one of the greats, but it's better than I remembered it being.
It's overall, I noticed that this episode has a completely different feel than the other episodes. And kind of what I think it is the feel is that everyone seems closer.
Yeah.
Like, Angel seems closer to the whole group. Like, he's kind of feels more a part of things. Cordelia feels more a part of the group. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just kind of like this episode started a cohesive group with all of them.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it just kind of, it's not in the last one, and it wasn't any in first season, and now it's just kind of like the group expanded.
Yeah.
Xander in this episode seems to be way cleverer. Like, he has got some really good quips.
Yeah.
In this one. And Willow seems way more confident. Like, everyone's just kind of better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it just has a completely different feel.
Yeah. It's
kind of what I noticed.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody's finally kind of coming to their own, and they had a really solid script to work off of, and all of the actors are comfortable in their roles now, and it just kind of came together.
Yeah. Anyway, I noticed that watching this, it's just kind of a completely different feel with the group.
Well, and there's a lot of good interactions that we're not used to. So it's going to be fun to break those down as we get to those parts of the episode.
Yeah. And kind of some of them, like this first conversation between Buffy and Angel in the cemetery in the first scene, you just kind of feel like, did I miss some growth in their relationship?
Yeah.
Like when did it come from what it was to this? Because now it's like a relationship. And it's kind of like you missed the little bit where that happened.
Yeah, like his line about how come when we fight you always bring up the vampire thing, and I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, where did that come from? And it's just kind of how they all interact with each other is just like they're closer and more comfortable than they were at the end of the last episode.
Yeah.
And just overall, kind of, I enjoyed it a lot. I just noticed it. I just wanted to point that out. That
no, I agree.
I noticed all that before we got started.
So Buffy is sitting on a gravestone waiting for a vampire to rise while she's playing with her yo-yo, which I believe we'll see again in next week's episode. So that's a fun little Easter egg there. And as she's waiting, Angel pops up, just kind of the most jealous that we've seen Angel to this point. We get a few moments of jealous Angel throughout the series. I like to call him 12-year-old Angel because that's what she literally calls him in the series finale. But he is He is just the most petty when he's jealous, and I kind of adore it. I think it's hilarious. He's just really fun to watch when he's just jealous and insecure as literally like the most gorgeous man.
They have this little discussion that kind of turns into a little bickering fight. Yes, they bicker now. And while they're doing that, the grave of the person she was sitting on, he rises from the grave behind them, and they don't see because they're so busy fighting, which is pretty funny. She says, I didn't come here to fight, and then the vampire leaps on her. And she's like, oh, right, I did. And then accuses Angel of taking her steaks. What'd you do with my steak? She does some very nice vampire slaying and then falls into an open grave.
Yeah. So I didn't think about this while I was watching that episode, but that whole I didn't come here to fight line. I mean, this is just how Buffy and Angel date, is they just randomly meet in the graveyard. And that's the equivalent of a date for these two. So it's just kind of funny that she had that moment of like, you know, I don't want to fight with you. We're out, you know, on our date where we randomly, you know, met up in the graveyard, not even planned.
Yeah.
And then she realized, oh yeah, that's not why I'm here. But I like the little nod to the fact that there is an age difference, which is one of the hiccups between these two, because he refers to Xander as just a kid, and Buffy calls him out on it hard by saying, if he's just a kid, am I just a kid too? And of course, we as the audience have always talked about, like, oh, Buffy's way more mature than Xander is. You know, she is definitely the adult in a 16-year-old body kind of situation going on. But it is something that I like is pointed out because that is an important thing to keep in mind and is something that comes up a lot in season 3 as well. But yeah, she falls into the open grave, and Angel makes this weird comment about another vampire has risen. Like, what did he think that the vampire did to get out of that grave so cleanly?
Like, with literally no dirt still in the grave.
Yeah. And after just having the conversation about, like, crawling out of the grave, which I also noted Buffy's done that at this point in the show, because she did it in Nightmares.
True.
Both of them have that experience. And Buffy calls it for what it is. Someone was dragged away from the grave.
Yeah, and then the next scene opens on Buffy and Xander entering the library, where Giles is very adorably sitting in a chair and practicing asking someone out on a date.
What I'm proposing is, and I don't mean to appear indecorous, is a social engagement, a date, if you're amenable. You idiot!
Boy, I guess we never realized how much you like that chair.
I love Giles in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, everyone is good in this episode.
Yeah. But he is just so adorkable, and you can't help but just have a huge grin anytime he's on screen in this episode. It's fantastic. He is failing miserably at asking out this chair and shouts idiot, I believe, and Buffy's just like,
Yeah.
Maybe not the best tactic, but I like that Buffy gives him, like, dating advice and is super casual about it.
Like, this is what you say.
Yeah.
I like how she says you ask her how she feels about Mexican, which will come up later in an adorable way. And then Xander guesses that it's Miss Calendar.
Very accurately.
Very accurately, yes. And they talk about last night and the empty grave. And I'm just, again, this seems like something important that you would tell your watcher before just waiting until the next day when you run into him at school. Like, why did she never call him? Like, hey, by the way, I found an empty grave in the cemetery tonight. Maybe we should talk about that, or you should research it. Instead of just wait until the next day, you know?
And we've definitely seen her do that before. Like, it didn't make sense when she did do that because there wasn't ever a time for her to do that. But in the episode Angel, he researched all night because somehow Buffy notified him.
Right, but she didn't. I mean, there's been a bunch of times where she doesn't
do that, yeah.
Yeah. And they discuss reasons someone might rob a grave, and they're going to ask Willow to fire up the machine and track it down.
Yep. So we cut to the hall from there, and it's science fair signups, and Willow is filling out her project information. And then we have a new character named Eric, who is very obnoxious.
Yes, very much.
Taking pictures of everyone. And then
without permission.
Yep. And then another new character, Chris, comes up, and Willow and Chris geek out about the science fair a little bit. Chris is...
Yeah. And this is why I say she's...
even than Willow, apparently.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And this is why I say she's a lot more confident, because she starts talking to him.
Yeah.
Like friendly and smiling and completely normal. You know, none of that I can't talk to boys awkwardness where she just stutters like last season. Mm-hmm. You know. And they have a nice little chat, and then Cordelia comes up to sign up for the science fair because she has to. And her intro is the tomato, fruit or vegetable.
I just love the line. I don't think school should make us do anything educational or something along those lines.
If we don't want to, yeah.
Buffy comes up to get Willow to go and do research. Eric continues to take photos of Buffy and Cordelia, and when all of the girls walk away, Eric and Chris are there talking about how Cordelia would be perfect for them. And Chris says, "Don't be an idiot. She's alive."
And that now we know that these are bad guys.
Yep.
And then they're all in the library, including Cordelia, who comes in like all friendly.
Yeah.
And just hanging out. It's interesting.
It's kind of, because this happens again in School Hard, where she's just in there like helping whittle stakes, and it's just like she's part of the group now. It doesn't feel like it's fully earned yet, but at the same time, I welcome it with open arms, and I don't care. That's how I feel about it, and I stand by that. But I love that she walks in under the pretense of, "Willow, I need help with my science fair project," which Willow just calls it like it is, which is delightful.
It's a fruit. Yeah. And then they're talking about Chris and discussing that his brother Daryl died, and Cordelia starts talking about how emotional she is and how much pain she has from that and everything, and they just kind of ignore her and continue talking about the case. And then Cordelia says, "Hello, can we deal with my pain, please?" And Giles just kind of, as he's walking back to the group and passes her, taps her on the shoulder and says, "They're there," and keeps walking. Yeah. Which is hilarious scene. Okay, we know Cordelia, we know how she is, we know how to handle her, so I'm just going to do this on our way, you know?
Yeah.
They just accept Cordelia, this is the way she is, and like we're going to keep working on the case. One thing, and this is literally the only difference in the script book, and it's not lines or anything, it's just that the person who does that in the script is Xander, not Giles.
Uh-huh.
That's the only difference.
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things again where it's we accept it because it's Cordelia, but it's kind of like a rude thing to ignore someone's pain like that. But Cordelia has racked up several boyfriends who have died at this point. And I'm just like, woo, Cordy.
Yeah, because
she's gone through some trauma.
This is like the fourth one or something, isn't it?
I don't know. It's bad, though.
Yeah.
Like, beaten or dead at this point. No one wants to date Cordelia anymore.
Oh, they keep talking about it and make a decision that they're going to meet at the graveyard and dig up the other girls that died with the first girl. Because apparently there were 3 girls that died in a car accident together. Mm-hmm. And they invite Cordelia to come, and she's like, "Oh, darn, no. I wish I'd known you'd be digging up dead people sooner."
Specifically, Willow is the one who invites her. And I think that's interesting because Willow invites her here, and she's also the one at the end of Out of Mind, Out of Sight who invites her to lunch. And so that's 2 instances of Willow trying to be the gateway for Cordelia to become part of the group. And of course, later we see that explode when Cordelia and Xander happen. But I think that that's really interesting that she's kind of pushing for Cordelia to be their friend, to be part of the gang at this stage. And I think that that's really interesting to note going forward. But yeah, she decides that digging up graves is not for her. Which I don't blame her.
Totally an okay decision to make.
Yeah.
And the next scene is them in the cemetery, and Giles and Xander are digging up the grave while Willow and Buffy sit on a blanket and eat snacks. and gossip about Angel.
Again, we're already seeing that serialized nature of it because we're talking specifically about the fallout of some of Buffy's decisions and when she was bad, and specifically the sexy dance, which I think is the best way to describe that. Willow's just like, oh, because of that sexy dance. And Buffy's like, oh, God, no, stop. It's interesting that actually had an impact. And you can see it a little bit subtle here and there as well, because just before in the library, they talk about calling Angel to come and meet them at the cemetery. And Buffy says that, Angel and I have been, and then she pauses, and you can see that Sarah Michelle Gellar looks up where Xander would be positioned and kind of makes a brief, eye contact with Xander and just like, never mind.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to admit that Angel is jealous of Xander because that would open up all kinds of doors that she doesn't want to deal with. But I like all of the fallout of that and how that they're addressing that. And you get the lovely line here of love makes you do the wacky, which is just such a Buffy line.
And they talk about who Daryl was, who was Chris's brother and a big fit football star who died rock climbing, which seems to be a pretty normal death for Sunnydale.
Maybe it's a vicious skin-eating rock cliff.
Then they open the coffin, or they get to the coffin and have a very funny discussion about what they're hoping to find in the coffin, and discover it's empty. So, oh no, another missing body.
Yeah. So we get a few moments with Chris and Daryl's mother later on, but this is the first time that it's mentioned that, like, the mother never leaves the house. The mother's few moments in this episode is some of the saddest stuff.
Yeah.
And this was, like, my first note. I'm just like, oh, she never leaves the house. But, yeah, we'll hit on that again and again throughout this episode.
I feel really bad for her losing a child, but I mean, she does have another child.
Yeah.
And as someone who has multiple children, I know that it would be absolutely devastating. And that would probably end up being me if I lost all of them. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I feel,
oh yeah. It's sad.
I kind of think that she needs to be taking care of her child that's left.
Yeah. It's sad on the level that obviously she is in severe depression for losing Daryl, but it's also extremely sad because she seems to have no way of acknowledging Chris anymore, and that makes Chris's storyline very tragic as well.
Yes, and I feel like maybe she should be trying to get some help so she could be there for her other child.
Oh, for sure.
I probably don't feel as sorry for her character as some people would, because I get a little angry when I see her just because she still has a child left.
Well, and that's
just kind of my thing with it.
And when I mean sad for the entire, like, that whole environment, that whole household is just a sad, terrible place.
It doesn't ever mention where the dad is.
Yeah. So. I would assume that there's just not a dad in the picture based on
probably not
what's developed here. But it is one of the first, we make the joke again and again, like, these kids don't have parents. It is one of the first times where we have just a mother present that isn't like a main plot point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's almost like he doesn't have one.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of see him having to take care of her.
Oh, yeah.
At points during it. And the next scene opens with Cordelia and two cheerleaders leaving school, and she's going to her car. Like, she splits up with them, and she's going to her car and kind of hears a noise and takes off running to her car. And I was like, I'm not sure that I would be in a parking lot in Sunnydale at night by myself. But
this is what I said. Like, Sunnydale really needs a curfew.
Yeah. She tries to get in her car, drops the keys, and she sees feet when she leans down to pick them up and takes off running. Although it's really interesting, when she's first walking to her car, she hears noises and she goes, Xander Harris, if this is your idea of a joke, kind of threateningly. And, like, Xander is her first thought.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think this is Xander messing with me. She didn't think about anybody else, and I think that's kind of telling.
That is certainly telling. There is a little bit of a thread line that you could pull from the fact that he made a joke about zombies eating her flesh earlier in the episode. but it is also like just wonderful foreshadowing because you also have that moment at the end of this episode. So you have to believe that all of that's very intentional, leading towards the Xander-Cordy relationship. She runs and then hides in a dumpster of all places, which, give it to Cordy, she'll do what she has to. But turns out it's just Angel. He's just lurking as he does.
Which is, kids don't know why he didn't just say hi.
Yeah.
Like, hi, I'm looking for Buffy, instead of following her all stalkerish and quiet like through a parking lot, you know?
But yeah, this is our first real solid Angel and Cordy scene, and I just found it delightful.
She spills the beans that Buffy lied to him and is in the graveyard. And then he tries to help her out of the dumpster, and her cheerleading skirt's caught on something, which ends up being an arm. Well, a hand, anyway.
Yep, and then we cut to the library, and the gang walks in to find Cordy clinging to Angel. They mention that all the coffins were empty, so they're thinking that it may be a zombie army. And then there's this amazing exchange when like everybody kind of sees each other, where Buffy says Angel's name, and then Angel says Xander's name, and then Xander says Angel's name.
Yeah. And Buffy tries to make up an excuse, and Angel's like, Cordelia told me the truth. They each like give the information they found, that the coffins were empty and that there were all kinds of body parts of girls in a dumpster.
And
I discovered they kept some parts.
Yeah. But before Angel divulges that tasty bit of information, because apparently he examined the parts well enough to be like, yep, that's not a full body there. He's already a detective. But Buffy has this incredible line, and I don't think I've ever really paid much attention to this line, but I think it's one of the standouts for this episode.
Why go to all the trouble to dig up 3 girls only to chop them up and throw them away? It doesn't make any sense, especially from a time management standpoint.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's just such a great, just solid line that I think I've just never really focused in on, of just how funny that line is.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. There are a lot of good lines in this episode.
Yeah.
From everybody, but I noticed they really upped the amount of good quips that Xander had.
Yeah.
Then they decide that it is probably a student from the science club. And that they're going to go check out the lockers of the guys in the science club. So they get the locker numbers and start doing that, and Cordelia are about to start doing that, and Cordelia's like, nope, I'm going home. Angel, can you take me? And then she says, great, I'll drive. And I'm like, how is he taking you home if you're driving?
This is my favorite bit of acting by David Boreanaz at this point, where he's just like, I don't know what to do. Buffy, save me. He like communicates so much and what's going on as he exits. He's like, I have no control of this.
Yeah, he looks just terrified.
And then, of course, Xander has the lovely, again, great line of, and I figured him for a one-woman vampire, which is not foreshadowing, but could be interpreted as foreshadowing, knowing the context of the full series.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because they definitely didn't have the Angel stuff down at this point. And then we switch to a scene where we're at Chris's house, and we see his mom, who's obviously depressed, and she's watching football videos of her oldest son and not really dressed, hair not fixed, and Chris comes out of his room and tells her he's going out and he'll be back later, and she basically ignores him.
Yeah.
And doesn't even acknowledge that he's there.
Yeah.
Which is very sad.
And I think the thing that makes her less sympathetic is that she ignores Chris, but she doesn't ignore Buffy later on. She talks to Buffy about Daryl. And I think if they had just left her being, like, catatonic the entire time, that would be one thing. But the fact that she so intentionally ignores Chris makes her a much harder character to sympathize with. And again, just a horrible, sad, like, there's a quite a bit developed here that really makes you empathize with Chris and kind of, understand some of the reasonings for why he's doing what he's doing. But it's real gross and icky, which is kind of the hard part about this episode. It's a real gross and icky episode.
Well, and I have way more sympathy for Chris than I do Eric.
Oh yeah,
Obviously.
Eric's just gross.
Yeah. We leave that scene and we're back to our gang and they're opening lockers to look in them. Yeah. And they find in Chris's locker several medical anatomy texts about muscles and tendons and a mortician's dex reference and all that. And then in Eric's locker, they find a little collage of different parts of women cut out of magazines to make one perfect woman.
Yeah, which is...
Or at least that's what it's supposed to be, and that's the description in the script book.
Super gross.
Very, very gross.
Oh, it's so gross. Even though Eric's over the top, I think the reaction to Eric and some of the choices that they make, such as in the next scene where Chris is working on the body and Eric is singing My Girl, which, by the way, is making it onto the playlist. But I just think that that's such a, like, appropriate song to sing to just make you, like, shudder and be like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah, it's creepy.
In that scene, Eric, while being just gross and disturbing, hangs up the photos that he took of Buffy, Willow, and Cordelia.
Mm-hmm. And basically tells Chris that we have to hurry, or she's not going to be anybody's baby. So, yeah. And then we have our gang, the main characters, Xander and Willow and Buffy, outside at school, just kind of standing there and discussing why anyone would decide to make a girl. Mm-hmm. And Buffy's asking, is it not doable, is it? And Willow's comment is just lovely. It says, if it is, my science project's definitely coming in second this year. Which... yeah, if that's Chris's science project, I think he's going to win.
Yeah.
And also be arrested. But
so, just prior to that, Xander has a very kind of poignant speech about love and, like, being drawn to the unattainable that seems deep, but really is kind of icky. Just kind of, I don't know. It's very, like, a 16-year-old boy's interpretation of love, and not really actually deep in or poignant in any way, but says a lot about Xander and actually gets a pretty, like, decent reaction from Buffy in that moment.
The things we do for love.
Love has nothing to do with this.
Maybe not, but I'll tell you this. People don't fall in love with what's right in front of them. People want the dream, what they can't have. The more attainable, the more attractive.
It's delivered in such a way that it feels like it should be like this really deep thing to think about. But the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah, and I always kind of skip over that because it makes it such a big deal because of the way he says it. He's all serious and intense, and Buffy and Willow just react like it's the most profound thing ever. And I'm basically like, yeah, that
eye roll.
Makes no sense and it's not right.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of gloss over that part because I'm like, no.
Well, I'm glad.
Not true.
I'm glad. I wanted to point it out because I was just like, it's really presented like it should be this thought-provoking thing, and I'm just like, it's not though. It's not. It's just teenage hormones.
I mean, I guess, when you're 16 or 17, maybe it's true, but no.
And then the gang spots Giles, who again is just adorable.
And you can tell he's about to bite the bullet and ask Miss Calendar out.
I love the piece of advice that Buffy gives him. She's like, she's a techno-pagan. Ask her to bless your laptop.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And then they have the most adorable conversation, at one point, Jenny goes, how do you feel about Mexican?
Yeah.
And the look on Giles's face, he just gets this grin. And I'm like, yeah, Giles, she just asked you out. And I love it. It's so cute. He's like, so shocked, and happy. Like a shocked happy. I love it. So they make a date for the football game that night. and are apparently going to eat Mexican on the way. And then we have Willow and Xander and Buffy again in looks like might be a science classroom. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of discussing how Chris and Eric didn't come to school. They're discussing whether or not they could have finished making the girl. And Giles comes in, and apparently he talked to the police, who shared with him that there were 3 heads. I don't know why they'd share that with the school librarian, but they did.
Yeah, maybe.
And so they realized that.
Sorry, this is real dumb. Maybe the Watchers Council has like some kind of fake badge that they can give Giles to get access to all kinds of crime scenes and like internal investigations. Because Giles just gets to go into crime scenes sometimes.
True. Would that be like psychic paper?
Yeah. I'm sure Watchers Council has their psychic paper somewhere.
Yes, Watchers Council psychic paper. I would love to see that. That feels like a plot point that we should have gotten. So they decide the heads are no good, so they can't finish their girl yet, and that they need a really, really fresh head. Yeah.
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 So we cut to Eric and Chris arguing about said head. And Eric says, you know what we have to do. And Chris is very defiant and says, I can't kill anyone. And looks to the corner and says, I can't do it. Please don't make me. And Daryl walks out, stitches covering his face. Very much a walking corpse, Frankenstein monster, yeah. Mm-hmm. And says, you promised me. And Eric has this bit of philosophy that we approach in a couple of different ways of like the balancing of lives and what it means to take a life kind of deal. But Eric says taking a life to make a life is a wash. And that's the first time that we start to get this kind of philosophical through line for Buffy, because she addresses this specific issue later in the episode. Kind of a cheesy, corny moment, though, is when Daryl, like, recites a, like, cheer to convince Chris that it's okay to murder someone.
Yeah.
Like, just a weird way to, like, pep up your brother to, like, go and kill a girl. Yeah.
But you can tell Chris is very reluctant, but finally, in the end, decides that it's okay to kill someone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they have the selection laid out for Daryl, and he picks Cordelia. And then again, My Girl is sung as Eric cuts her head out. Really excellent. Yeah. Whoever thought that was the song that he needed to be singing just deserves all of the praise for this. The more I think about it, the more I know I'm never going to listen to that song the same way.
We go back to the science classroom where the main gang is talking and realize that they're going to have to kill someone for a head. And Giles kind of just leaves to go on his date with Jenny, and Willow and Buffy and Xander and Giles decide that they'll all meet up at the game, while Xander and Willow go to Eric's to investigate, and she's going to go to Chris's. And then Willow tells Buffy to not be too hard on Chris because he's not a vampire. Mm-hmm. And Buffy says, no, he's just a ghoul.
Yeah. So Willow does this a couple of different times throughout the series, where she's kind of like reminds Buffy when someone's a human, which is always weird because Buffy is super aware anytime that she's up against a human versus up against something supernatural, but yet Willow sometimes feels the need to point that out to Buffy. But Buffy here, like, is one of the most upset at just a random student scenario that we've seen her. We've talked about how Buffy tends to be very empathetic to the students and the stuff that they're doing, but Buffy doesn't have very much chill for Chris in this scenario. But it is a very what he's doing, or what they're believing he's going to do, is far worse than just killing someone. It's killing someone to bring them back to live as a monster. And it is
a monster, to live as a monster and a sex slave.
Yeah, which is just
yeah.
Like, Buffy has connected all of these dots super fast, and the fact that Willow is still trying to push for a little bit of empathy for Chris, it's a hard thing to sell. Because, man, if you just take it on the surface level of what's going on here, it is gross. And Buffy calls it like it is. She's just like, no, he's a ghoul. He doesn't really deserve any of my sympathy in this scenario. It's an episode that is just gross, but is framed in such a way that the episode acknowledges that it's gross without making it too gross. Like, it doesn't go into too much detail about what's really going on here, but leaves enough to the audience's imagination to where they can fill in all of that and really be like, yep, this is gross. So I think it's very well balanced in that sense.
Yeah. The next scene is at Chris's house, and Buffy knocks on the door, and the mom answers the door. Buffy's like, hey, I'm a friend of Chris. Is he home? And the mom completely ignores her, just turns around and walks away. Mm-hmm. But leaves the door open, so Buffy goes inside. And there's a little description here in the script book of what the room looks like, what the living room looks like. And it basically says that the entirety of the walls in the living room are papered with photos of Daryl throughout his life, articles about him, framed letter sweater, framed letter jacket, and trophies everywhere. Like the room is a shrine. And in the actual episode, we don't really see that. It's just like a normal living room. Except Mom is in there watching the videos. But in the description of it, it's supposed to be like a complete and total shrine. And I guess they just maybe didn't have time to do that, or the stuff they needed to do that, you know?
Yeah, it's very possible. Or it could have been a decision that was a bit much by the director or somebody later on after the script was finalized. But man, that would have pushed me to the point of being like, yeah, this woman is completely obsessed with her son in a super, super unhealthy way. I mean, it's one thing
I kind of already think that.
Yeah,
but.
It's one thing to mourn your son, and you kind of get this feeling that this mother really never really cared for Chris and had all of her focus on Daryl, and Daryl was her superstar, and Daryl was her one and only, kind of gross, mother-son relationship. But had they gone that extra mile to really plaster that all over the walls, yeah, that would have been just no subtlety at all at that point.
Yeah. So Chris's mom completely ignores any questions Buffy asks her and just does like a running commentary on the game that she's watching. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess Buffy finally decides to just ignore her, and she goes into Chris's room because Mom is so obsessed with the video she's watching. She finds the photos of her and Willow and Cordelia, and sees a medical drawing of all the different joints and muscles and stuff of a woman's body, and pasted over the head is a photo of Cordelia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and during this entire time, you have Daryl just looming, slowly creeping towards Buffy. Poor Slayer senses, sometimes they don't work.
Well, he's not a vampire.
Truth. But yeah, there's a noise and Buffy hops out the window.
But we never find out what that noise is.
Yeah.
But it's an unexpected noise because Daryl, who conceivably lives there, is shocked too, because he's about to grab Buffy and attack her, and they both hear the noise, and he like fades back into the dark, and she jumps out the window.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a noise that he's not used to either.
Yeah. And it's especially funny when you think about later on in the episode, in that same room, he's like throwing stuff and screaming. And I mean, like, it can't be like he's trying to hide from his mother, because if he can do that, his mother's not reacting to anything.
Mm-hmm. And then the next scene is the cheerleaders getting ready for the game, and they leaving Cordelia alone. They leave her alone a lot in this episode. So she's doing her makeup in the mirror, and she sees Chris behind her. It's like, what are you doing in here? Are you okay? Then someone puts a sack over Cordelia's head and starts to kidnap her. Mm-hmm. She gets kidnapped a lot. And then we see the two cheerleaders that left And Buffy runs up to them and is like, hey, where's Cordelia? And one of the cheerleaders, who apparently has a chip on her shoulder, is like, yeah, Cordelia doesn't need you right now. You're a loser,
So
whatever. And I'm like, y'all are such...
That's the same actress and the same cheerleader from Witch that, like, says, get it together, Buffy, or whatever. So that girl doesn't like Buffy, and I think that that's a nice through line. But Buffy at this point, again, has no chill, and it's just like, excuse me?
Yeah, she slaps her fist on the wall, and it's like, where did you say she was? So Buffy comes in and basically saves Cordelia because they're still trying to kidnap her because she's fighting. And Buffy kicks Eric off of her and unties Cordelia. And Cordelia decides she has to go be in the cheerleader pyramid, so she's not staying. Like, I was just almost kidnapped. I'm going to go cheer in this game now.
That explains so much about Cordelia to me.
Yeah.
Like, because we made some comments about, Cordelia just goes casually blind in one episode and just doesn't have any reaction to it. Like, there's several times where we noticed that she just bounces back, but that's just who Cordelia is. Like, in this, like, she was nearly kidnapped and she was just like, nope, gotta cheer. I totally buy that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just one of those things. Cordelia's part of the group. Cordelia prioritizes, cheerleading over her own, like, personal safety.
Buffy starts talking to Chris, who's still there. Eric ran away, but Chris is still there. And she's basically like, look, you haven't hurt anyone yet. You can't do this. I know you lost your brother, but this is wrong. And Chris basically is like, I have to do it for him. And Buffy's like, who are you talking about? There's a little more conversation there, but basically at this point, Buffy realizes that he's talking about making a girl for his brother because he's already brought his brother back to life. Mm-hmm. And I find it very clever because I think it would take me longer to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
That he has reanimated his dead brother and is trying to make her a woman as a companion. And I think it would take me longer to jump to that than it did Buffy.
This is also when you see the switch where it becomes slightly more like Buffy's still not cool with this scenario in any way, shape, or form, but this is where you start to see Buffy start to empathize with him again because of what he's doing and the reasoning behind it. But yeah, like her face in that moment, that reaction, that realization is really well done of just like the like gradual like piecing it together in her brain and then that sudden connection of understanding who exactly Chris is talking about. And you're just like, yeah, that's how Buffy's mind works. She can make those leaps. I've made some jokes about Buffy's leaps in the past, but that one, and I think 90% of it is the performance that she gives there, I totally buy. Like, I see her, like, working those gears in her head as she's trying to, like, figure out who it is that he's talking about. And then she's just like, oh my God, this is what's happening.
Oh, yeah, it's very believable. I get it. I just don't think I'd have got there that fast.
Yeah.
So, and then we switch to Daryl back in Chris's room, and he's throwing things and raging that his brother promised, and he's going to be alone now. And Eric is there, and Eric basically convinces him that, hey, I can do this too. Let's go do it. And so they head off into the night to apparently kill Cordelia and bring her back as a zombie Frankenstein person.
Buffy and Chris are looking for Daryl, and Chris makes the comment that he would never go out, which makes me wonder, how did he exit? Did he, like, slither through the window like Buffy, or did he just walk past his mom and his mom didn't notice him? Because there's no way.
Did not think of that, but I think his mom would probably notice him. I'm guessing he went out the window.
Yeah, he's a big boy, but he got through that window too.
Then we are at the big game, and it's Jenny and Giles, and they are discussing the difference between American football and rugby.
Like, Jenny, like, recites a poem about sports.
Yeah.
It's very intense, and not something that I would equate to Jenny Calendar.
I don't know what it is about football that does it for me. I mean, it lacks the grace of basketball, the poetry of baseball. At its best, it's unadorned aggression. Such a rugged contest.
Yeah, she's very into the sports ball.
But yeah, Giles just flat out disses American football, which I quite enjoy. Anytime Giles complains about something that's American is just amusing to me.
Jenny and Giles are just so cute together.
here we have this lovely moment where Ginny casually drops that they're on a date, and Giles is just like, did you say date? And she's just like, you noticed that, did you? To which Willow and Xander crash their date.
Show up. Yeah. Sit with them and take their popcorn.
Yeah.
Which they can't be too hungry. They just had Mexican. Daryl is wandering under the bleachers, watching the football game and very upset about what he's missing out on. And in as many as 2 days, had 2 very scary situations where someone either actually was or she thought someone was trying to attack her. Again, wanders off alone for the 3rd time to get some water and is kidnapped by Daryl.
Also, why do they have to have the water set up in like that weird secluded area? Are they afraid that people are going to be like, oh, they have to hydrate? Well, I don't believe that.
Like, why is it not just out there? Buffy and Chris are looking for Cordelia and they can't find her. And then we cut to the old science lab, which apparently Sunnydale has an old science lab because they had the money to build a new science lab.
Mm-hmm.
And Cordelia's laying on a gurney and promising over and over again she would never scream. I won't scream, I promise.
Scream all you want. We're in an abandoned building. Okay, that's enough.
And Daryl kind of gives her this speech about how he didn't appreciate her and he didn't know what it meant that she cared about him and that now she'll always be with him and he'll never take her for granted again.
Mm-hmm.
Which is creepy, which kind of gives us the thought that they weren't actually a couple. Cordelia just kind of had a crush on him.
Yeah, well, there's a pretty extreme age difference because the mother says that he would have been 19. So that's a 3-year age gap. So they definitely weren't close in grade level.
And then Eric starts to tell her about what he's going to do, which apparently he's going to do while she's awake. Because he's like, you're going to feel some discomfort around the neck area. So I'm guessing he's going to try to cut her head off while she's awake.
So after that lovely moment with Eric just continuing to be the creepiest, they decide to show Cordelia what her body's going to be. And we've mentioned a couple of times about Cordelia screaming in this episode. But the fact that they have this moment where they just lift the sheet and then they cut to Cordelia's reaction and she has just an amazing, like, blood-curdling scream. I mean, is such a good way of showing just how grotesque
creepy whatever under there was.
Whatever is under there really is. But, like, that is an impressive scream that she pulls off there.
And Cordelia is good at screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we cut back to Buffy and Chris, and Buffy finds Cordelia's pom-poms on the ground and is like, he was here. Chris, where is he? And convinces Chris to tell him where they're at. And she says he's in the old science building. And Buffy tells him to find Willow and Xander and Giles and tell them what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And she takes off.
Yeah, and here's the line where Buffy says, you can't just give and take lives like that. It's not your job.
It's not your job.
And it's again, this is a very, like, subtle representation of something that comes up again and again in Buffy. It comes up with faith and the idea of what lives can be taken and what lives can't be taken. Comes up in Dead Things in season 6. It is a through line that we see again and again of the kind of difference between a slayer and a killer, right? This is just a very subtle hint to that, but already you can see how Buffy's understanding of her responsibilities and the way that slaying works in the supernatural world versus killing works in the human world. Mm-hmm. You can already see that philosophy taking form, and this is a really good instance of that. We can't just give and take lives. There's no balance, that can justify the taking of a life.
Yes.
But yeah, I was just kind of surprised by that. There's some surprisingly, deep stuff in this episode about 2 high schoolers building a woman out of dead parts.
Yeah, it's surprising that someone who was willing to build a woman out of dead parts takes this so seriously.
Yeah.
Because you would think he would, already not care about taking lives.
Yeah.
Buffy heads to the science lab, where Eric has poured gas into a generator because he's gonna, I guess, do surgery with a generator.
He knows how to do it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I lost my place with that.
I want to know, what was Eric's actual role in this whole project? Was he just the guy creepy enough to be like, yeah, I want to help you move body parts around? Like, where does he come into this scenario?
Yeah, Buffy comes in and Cordelia's like, Buffy, help me. Buffy tells Daryl that your brother sent me to stop you. And Daryl's like, no, he wouldn't do that. He loves me. And Daryl picks up a knife and starts to run toward Cordelia. Like, I guess, gonna go ahead and do this. Because Eric has, already run into a corner, afraid, and I guess Daryl now decides that he can do it. Because apparently this is so easy to do that just anyone could make a zombie. Frankenstein.
Apparently.
Daryl screams, I won't live alone, and Eric tries to make a break for it. Daryl throws him into the wall. A Bunsen burner falls to the ground, where gas has already pulled on the ground from this fight, and a fire starts. Mm-hmm. And then Xander runs in.
Xander, slip and slides in. His entrance is so ridiculous. I love it.
Trying to untie Cordelia, and Daryl throws a bottle of something that's flammable at Buffy, and it bursts into flames, and now there's fire everywhere.
It's just going from bad to worse.
Yes, and Willow and Giles show up and see Eric on the floor, and grab him and pull him out. And I would like to say that this is the very last time we see Eric. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, what happens to him? Because he's all kinds of a serial killer in the making. And I'm just wondering what happens to, does he get some therapy? Does he go to jail? Is he even arrested? Did we even tell the principal what happened? Anything at all? Did we get a detention? What? Xander does this very brave thing where he jumps on the gurney and slides it through the fire with Cordelia on it, and he covers her to get out. And Buffy's still fighting Daryl, and then Daryl looks down at Buffy, decides not to finish fighting her, and goes and jumps on the headless body of the woman that they were making for her. I assume that they both burned to death. Mm-hmm. Although, I'll mention that in the final scene, there are cop cars and fire trucks and stuff everywhere, and that they will, in fact, find these bodies that are parts all sewn together of Daryl, and then a combination of the 3 girls that died in the car accident.
Yep.
So this episode ends with lots of questions for the authorities, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's honestly
what happened here?
Probably a typical week in Sunnydale.
But then we never find out what happens to Chris or Eric after this scene.
Yeah, Chris has a little moment with Buffy in the aftermath.
Does he?
Yeah, and he says,
well, I was wrong then. He did come back.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
He says something that I think is really interesting, and again, it's one of those moments that you can tie to something that happens later in Buffy, but Chris is talking about Daryl and how Daryl, when he was first reanimated, said that Chris shouldn't have brought him back, which of course immediately makes me think of season 6 and all of that. You know, the idea of the giving and taking of lives that I mentioned before is something that's super serious throughout all of Buffy, and this is kind of one of those quieter moments that for some reason this watch through made me think a lot more of this idea that Chris was talking about, Daryl saying, oh, I shouldn't have been brought back initially. And then you can see the development from there, kind of got obsessed with this idea of having a companion, and then when seeing that it was just a body, I mean, it was just parts sewn together, seeing that it was burning, decided to go and die with it, is kind of, again, one of those moments that is shockingly powerful. But yeah, and then Angel comes up and asks, is everyone okay? And then that's the last we see of Chris.
Yeah. Yes, I was wrong. That was he did come back.
Eric, however, we have no idea.
Oh yeah, we don't know what happens to him or what happens to Chris after this point. Yeah. Just does he go work for NASA? Because he's that much of a genius, and there is a scene a few episodes from now where some giant tech science program comes to the school to see like these really smart students, because I know Oz and Willow are both there, but there's no Chris there. And you would think if he was still a student at the school, he'd get chosen for this program. I mean, he did reanimate dead tissue and make it, sentient and everything. That seems like a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah. I assume Snyder expelled him, not for anything to do with this, but simply because he was loitering after school.
Yep, possibly.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Eric, however, grows up to be a serial killer.
Yeah.
So then Angel shows up and comes up to Buffy and has this line that's, "I saw the fire, figured you'd be here." Which I love. Love, love, love.
Angel's so funny in this episode. Can I just say that right now? Angel is so funny in this episode.
And I'm curious, can we count this as the second school building that Buffy has burned down?
We could, but unfortunately, there's also a line in next week's episode where the other bad girl asks Buffy, "Did you really burn down a gym one time?" And Buffy's like, "Well, it wasn't just one time." So I don't know at this point what her count actually is.
Well, I think she was probably talking about this one.
Maybe.
So then we have Giles and Jenny talking about how bad their date was. And Jenny does the little thing where she mentions a second date. And Giles is like, "Did you say second date?" Still so cute.
And then we have Willow and Xander just painfully aware of their being single. Cordelia, again, we saw this at the end of Out of Mind, Out of Sight, where she comes and thanks the whole gang, but here she comes and specifically thanks Xander, which this is entirely has to be foreshadowing. This scene doesn't really make sense other than the fact that it's kind of a joke that these two are going to be paired off later. But yeah, like comes up and like specifically calls out Xander.
Really sincere.
And like has this like really heartfelt, "What you did was so brave, and I just, if there's anything that I could ever," and Xander just completely blows her off. And then she makes this great face. I'm just like, well, okay then.
Xander looks at Willow and says, "So, where were we?" And she says, "Wondering why we never seem to have dates." And in the episode, I noticed she just kind of says that like she's there with Xander in the same place, But in the script book, she's supposed to say that very sarcastically. Like she noticed that Cordelia was kind of flirting and stuff to Xander. And he blew her off. Like she was supposed to see something, But in the show, she just kind of is there with him, Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's kind of like, oh yeah, we're both in the same boat, rather than just directly calling out Xander on his crap.
Yeah. And then we have Buffy and Angel walking along together, and Angel mentions that he was kind of jealous of Xander. Because Xander gets to be part of her life when he can't and see her in the sunlight and stuff.
Yeah, and this is actually like a really deep, poignant speech.
And it's really kind of melancholy.
Yeah.
What he says here.
Crazy, like a 241-year-old being jealous of a high school junior.
Are you fessing up?
I thought about it. Maybe it bothers me a little.
I don't love Xander.
Yeah, but he's in your life. He gets to be there when I can't. Take your classes, eat your meals, hear jokes and complaints. He gets to see you in the sunlight.
And then Buffy kind of just brushes it off. I don't look all that great in direct sunlight. And then Buffy decides to walk Angel home, which he keeps getting driven home and walked home by the girls.
Well, here's my note. He was supposed to take Cordelia home, which is kind of a silly thing because she was the one driving. But the idea is that Angel took Cordelia home, but Buffy took Angel home, which again kind of plays with this idea of power dynamics and what, a relationship with Buffy is really like. Because Buffy is the one who gets to escort Angel home in this scenario, and I think that that's like a nice little kind of cute subtle thing. I think it's a bit of a leap in like what you said at the beginning, where it seems like they progressed in their relationship without us really seeing it, but I really like the Buffy and Angel stuff in this episode. I think it's rather cute.
It is, and it's not like like they're officially a couple or
Right.
anything. It's
They're
just kind
still-
of like some steps we missed.
Yeah.
It's not like we went from single to, you know, steady couple, but we missed some steps getting there.
Yeah.
They're like way more there than they were the last episode. Like, you know, we don't see Willow's personality completely develop in this jump, but it did take several steps we didn't see. Like, you can tell there's a difference in everybody, including Xander.
Yeah.
Like Xander, Willow, and Angel, and Cordelia. Like, all of them. We kind of just moved several steps forward that we missed.
Yeah. And I think at this point, we're really at the point with Cordelia where she subconsciously, she'd never admit it, but she wants to be part of the group. She,
Oh, yes, definitely.
And when she was bad, she specifically goes to talk with Buffy. In this episode, she goes into the library to ask Willow for help. Like in the next episode, we see her whittling steaks with everybody. She wants to be part of this group. She likes these people. She sees what they're doing and why it's worthwhile and why she wants to be part of it. And it's one of those things where we miss some steps, but understanding where these characters eventually meet up, like where they all land, you see where those steps would have been. We just kind of passed over them. But yeah, I definitely, yeah, I didn't really think that much about the jarring transition into this episode and how much it seems like there was an evolution with all of the characters. But you're right, you're dead accurate. Like, these characters had like an overnight growth between these two episodes, but I'm so here for it.
Definitely. Well, that was some assembly required. Next week's episode will be the first episode with Spike.
Spoilers.
I think we're way past spoilers. We're giving spoilers for stuff that happens in like season 4 of Angel. Like, we're past spoilers here.
Very excited. School Hard is one of my favorites. School Hard is an episode that I could no doubt talk like 5 hours straight about. So we got to be prepared for that one.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be lots of fun. I'll do my best to have my computer set up before 9 o'clock.
Thank y'all so much for listening. And we'll be back again to talk about Blondie Bear. Bye.
Bye.